Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining, everyone. I'm here on behalf of DBSA California. We're the statewide chapter. I'm on the board myself, and our lovely tech for today, Krish. She is also on the board. So we're really excited to host everybody today, and just genuinely looking forward to getting to know you and spending some time together today. The career navigation for people with mood disorders series, there's six in the entire series. They are not chronological at all. You can pop in on any one of them whenever, any of the topics interest you. However, we do record them all. So at the end, we'll send out a link for the YouTube channel. So if there's anyone that you happen to miss or ones that you're interested in that you weren't able to make at that time, definitely we'll make that available to you too. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. Glad to see you here. A few housekeeping items before we get going. Please keep your microphone on mute for the majority of the presentation. I will at times say like, oh, you can come off mute and share if you'd like, or put it in the chat. I'll cue that though. So in the meantime, just keep your microphones on mute, and then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. Feel free to put your camera on if you feel comfortable. If you don't, absolutely no worries at all. And then again, we'll have Q&A. You can put questions in the chat. I try to keep up with it, but I might not notice it until the end. I do try to get to as many questions as possible. And from there, we'll just go ahead and get started. Oh, and also a disclaimer too. At the end, we turn the recording off for Q&A so that you feel comfortable to chat and everything. But as much time as we have at the end, I am all yours. All right. So with that, our lineup for today, we're going to start with staying well while job searching. A lot of this will be about, setting up your schedule, making sure you're staying well while you're searching. Telling your story as you apply, so figure out a little way to talk about where you are and why you're applying to a position at a given time. We'll talk about networking without the phoniness. There's ways to do it that feel more natural, so we'll talk about that a little bit. And managing hard days. Job searching is an adventure to say the least. So, especially for people with mood disorders, some things to keep in mind when you're having those symptoms. And then from there, we'll do some next steps and resources. So that's a little bit of a roadmap for today. But before we really get going, I wanted to just introduce myself. I'm Dr. Caroline Fraissinet. I am a career coach, career advisor. I have my own practice, Career Wavelength, and the focus on that is exactly what we're doing today. It's career navigation, and I am coming from a lived experience perspective from it. I have cyclothymia, which is on the bipolar spectrum. I also live with OCD and ADHD. So my perspective then comes first and foremost as a person living with a mood disorder, so as a peer. But also I have worked as a career advisor for years in higher education. I've worked with people at the very start of their careers, at the point of transitioning careers, and very far into their careers. So I'm familiar with everything in terms of one's career development. My doctorate is in organizational change and leadership. So a little bit of that is also informed by understanding how organizations think and work. So that all combined is a little bit of my background and where I'm coming from in sharing today this workshop with you. So I want to start off by saying balance is crucial. Job searching can really feel like a full-time job in and of itself. So don't let it burn you out. It's grueling in its own ways, both emotionally, physically, mentally, all of those ways. So taking a balanced approach is important for anybody, but especially important if you're living with a mood disorder, because uh, our balance is already a little bit tipply. So staying balanced is going to be what helps you in the long run. So one thing I like to start with is setting a consistent cadence. Just like having work-life balance, search life balance can also help you stay well. So with that, a couple of tips before we really get into it. So keeping a consistent schedule is important. It can become a full-time job. I don't like to say it is a full-time job because, people have different capacities. You might be searching for a job while you're already working a job. So at that point, it isn't your full-time job then. Or you might have other commitments, and expecting it to be a full-time job is just not always reasonable. However, it is definitely a job. So, scheduling your activities just like you would with anything else in your schedule can be helpful in terms of setting boundaries and making sure that you're staying motivated as well. Don't push yourself too hard. People with mood disorders might need to adjust their speed depending on their symptoms and their personal needs. And I'll get into more specifics about that in a couple slides. But making sure to keep that pace reasonable, depending on what your goals are, is really important. Search life balance. Again, it's very important. One thing I like to do is set business hours. So when you are off the clock, for example, 5 p.m. or whenever you choose to keep your schedule, end your search for the day and focus on other things that you have going on in your life. So basically, if a 9 to 5 schedule happens to work for you, don't work after 5 p.m. Don't work beforehand. This is something I constantly struggle with, so I also want to be upfront by saying, like, these are not things that I can consistently say I do all the time. So this is challenging. And be kind to yourself. Job searching is very hard. Make sure you're not neglecting your wellness activities and reward yourself for those victories along the way. With that said, I'd like to start us off with a little activity, and we'll have a few of these sprinkled throughout the entire workshop. But I'll put on the timer for a couple minutes here, and think about your energy level. What typically leads you to have more energy? What leads you to have less energy? Because with mood disorders, it's very linked to your circadian rhythms. So knowing what your natural energy levels are is really important in terms of figuring out when your best time to relax is and when your best time to be doing more active work is. So it involves stamina, of course. So I have a couple questions here. What time is your energy highest? When does it wane? And what do you do to recharge so you don't burn out? So, with that, I'm going to set the timer for, let's do 3 minutes. Let's see how that goes. All right. So, I do see some things in the chat here, which is great. 6:30 a.m. and 2 p.m. I take my ADHD medication to avoid burnout since I'm going to school and work full time. Yes, see, that's great. You already have a sense of what your rhythms are, and your what you're working with when you're going through a job search. So that's awesome. Deep breathing and a nap help. Absolutely. Yeah, those are great recharge activities. It's important to take those breaks as well. They're just as important as the activities that you're doing. I also did see in the chat to comment on transition at an older age, if possible. Absolutely happy to address that. But you heard it here first. 2 months from now, we're going to be doing a workshop all about career transitions. When you're deciding to change direction. So definitely keep that in mind too. It's at the end of June. That one will be. Um, yeah, so I mean, there's any number of things that you might know about your own personal rhythms. There are definitely strategies that work for that. IPSRT, which is interpersonal social rhythm therapy, where you track your individual wake up time, break time, going to sleep time. Very important for bipolar and depression. I will also be talking about that in a future workshop too. But knowing your energy is really important here. Energy level is good in the afternoon, occasionally in the morning. Exactly. Yeah. So having a sense of what your natural rhythms are really important. Just to use myself as an example, I actually work really well with the 9 to 5 schedule. So usually around 10 to 12, I have a good burst of energy, and then 1 to 3. After 4, I tend to taper off. So that's something that I factor into my schedule as well. All right, next slide. So managing your time. This is something I struggle with constantly as somebody with ADHD. But job searching is time consuming, and the one resource that is most critical here is actually time. So effective time management strategies can help. I'm going to just introduce one of them that I've found works and is very adaptable depending on how you individually work, which you might have heard of already. It's called the Pomodoro method. This is just one idea for time management in your job search, and I'll tell you a little bit how it works. It was developed by Francesco Cirillo in the 1980s. Pomodoro means tomato in Italian. So it was named after a little tomato-shaped timer, which was in the previous picture, that he used to break up the intervals. So traditionally, it is 2 hour block total, four intervals. So 25 minutes of a focused activity, 5 minute break after each slot, and then at the end, you take a 30-minute break before going into another one or stopping. Um, this is very adaptable, though. If you find 25 and 5 does not work for you, you can find Pomodoro timers all over where you can set the individual times. So, using this specifically to apply to mood disorders, a couple of strategies that I've noticed have worked, at least for myself and some of my clients. So if you're having trouble getting motivated and you're more on the depressive side, um, I recommend focusing on job search related activities for just one of those cycles. Then spend the rest of the time on other things. It is an energy related condition. So, and we'll talk about this later too. Try your best not to see it as anything other than I'm experiencing the conditions of my medical condition. And that means that I have to come back a little bit. I can't do as much as I normally can. That doesn't mean that any kind of progress that you're making is not valuable. So you could do one 25-minute segment on job searching. Then maybe the next one, you watch a TV show you like. That's a restorative activity for you. So it's not wasting time if you know that you are needing that to continue your momentum. It's a marathon and not a sprint. So reframing it in that way can be helpful when you're in a depressive episode. On the other hand, if you tend to get too focused or on the hypomanic side, use the Pomodoro for the opposite intention, which is to keep yourself from hyper focusing. This is something that I do daily because I tend to be more on the hypomanic side. So you can dedicate an interval or two to job search activities, but then that's it. Like you make sure like I'm going to maximize the time that I have in this because then I have to move on. I have a list of recommended apps that I'm going to send out after this presentation, and there's some that have more and less friction. So if you just need a gentle reminder, it'll do that, but you can make it as friction, add as much friction as it'll kick you off the computer, where it really forces you to take a break. But using it as a time boundary is a useful way to do it too. And we'll get into this much more later. We have a whole section on, when it's a hard day, but have patience and know you're not alone in the search process. It is not easy at all. And make sure you're taking care of yourself in all areas of your wellness as you go through this career journey. You are a whole person. You are not any one thing that you do. So making sure that you're taking care of yourself is really important. So now we're going to move into a little bit of your own storytelling and what you're going to actually put on your applications. So developing a strong objective statement will really be what we're talking about today, but that will weave through all of your application materials. So it's all a matter of telling your story. So the question that I recommend considering when you apply for a particular job is to think about why are you applying to this job and why now? Being able to communicate your story and how that led you to applying to a specific job at a specific time can guide your application approach. Objective statements sometimes are very general, where it's like, I have this amount of experience, I'm looking for this general role. I recommend dialing in even more, where it's what actually interests you about this position that you're applying to and why this one specifically. We'll work on this a little bit too in sort of framing how to approach it. But dialing in a little bit more specifically can really make your application stand out because it's more specific than just a general statement. So, I used to study film, undergrad and grad, and we learned about the Pixar story spine. This was used by animators and writers at Pixar, the animation studio. Originally, it was designed to pitch a story, so pitch a film idea. However, it also is a really useful exercise for defining your objective statement. So, we'll do a fun exercise here too. But basically, the way that it works is you're outlining a story here. So it starts with once upon a time, you set that up, and then every day, whatever that is, but then one day, and then because of that, ever since until finally. So I'll show you an example of this just to make it a little bit clearer. But this can be a good way to sort of think about your objective statement as it relates to a job. You want to end with until finally I saw this job and I wanted to apply. An example I'll show you as well using my own experience. Once upon a time, I studied film to be a writer. Every day, I would learn and reflect on what I wanted in a career. Until one day, I realized I didn't like working on set, and I went to my professor crying. Because of that, my professor calmly worked with me to figure out what was right for me. Because of that, I realized that I wanted to do what she was doing to help me and became interested in career advising. And ever since, I have been helping people define and achieve their career goals. Until finally, I was diagnosed with cyclothymia and found DBSA and was able to use my skills to help other people with mood disorders like me to achieve their career goals. So that's my story in terms of what brought me to this workshop today. So framing your own story in those kinds of terms and knowing that's the objective can sometimes help in terms of figuring out where to start with your application and your materials. Okay, so there's bumps in the road all the time. I've definitely experienced a couple of career transitions since I got out of school. Since I've had careers in multiple areas. So I just want to make it clear that even if there's fog, the path forward can still continue. It does continue. If you're not quite sure where to start because of a gap or a change or whatnot, focus on the skills and values that persisted across chapters. Your story does not need to be linear in order to be true. Thinking about it more broadly in terms of what are the skills that I developed even outside of any one individual position you might have held, that can help you get the story bullet points to tell your objective statement. So I'm gonna put 5 minutes on the clock. Take a few minutes to write one or two little bullet points, and I'll go back to the screen in terms of what the format is. It does take time to develop, so we're definitely not going to get to all of it today. But in reflecting on where you are right now, how can you apply this to your job search? I will put the timer on. I'm going to go back to the objective statements here and try to think of one or two for the different bullet points, even if it's just once upon a time. Even if you just get to once upon a time, that's gonna get you going in terms of like where to go next. So, I will put 5 minutes on the clock. Feel all right. Well, I see a wonderful one in the chat that I would love to share with you. Florence says, for over 20 years, I lived with unmanaged borderline personality disorder and depression. A close friend once said that if I stay alive, I might be able to help someone. I'm managing well, and this is what brings me to the job of peer specialist. I want to take my years of suffering and turn it into something positive. Beautiful. Did a great job with telling your story. I definitely, first off, thank you for the work that you're doing. It's so critical to, helping people see that they're not alone and whatnot to be a peer specialist. But also gave a very good explanation of where your story is and where you're at. Wonderful work. I see here another one. Once upon a time, I was an engineer. Then I got to a point that I was not happy with my high-tech work and corporate work. I took a few years to spend more time with my son and the rest of my family. I enjoy helping and working with people. I enjoy teaching and spending time with young kids and young adults. I prefer not getting teaching credentials. Love it. Yeah, absolutely. First off, I've definitely, a couple of my career transitions where I don't like this anymore. I want to do something else. And following your values, what you enjoy, that's beautiful. You did a wonderful job in telling your story as well. I'm loving these. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. I really appreciate you feeling comfortable to share those. But again, this is an exercise that you can do to sort of open yourself up and think of things in a different way as you're approaching your applications. Where's my mouse? Oh my goodness. Okay, there we go. All right. So moving right along. So you're telling your story as you apply. The more clearly you can communicate why you are interested in working for an organization as you apply for their position and why now, that'll help them understand your unique value to the workplace in that particular position. So how do you convey that in a resume? So again, you're going to start with that objective statement. So take the objective you used with the Pixar story spine, and then you build it into 1 to 3 sentences. The two that were in the chat, beautiful examples, very straightforward, could definitely help to contribute to an objective statement. What you'll do then is just make sure that it is related to the position and say, like, I am interested in this because XYZ. So your last sentence will just be something tying it to that specifically. Focusing on your skills. Creating a skills section using some of the ones you identified. We do have a previous workshop where we did an exercise with that, but we've got another really fun one in this one as well. Conveying what your abilities are within a general skill set context beyond what you put in terms of like these are the literal things at my job. These are the skills I developed. That is an important way to approach it. Select relevant experience. So one way that, if you have experience in different areas, like let's say you're transitioning from, well, for me, it was entertainment to education. Creating a section that says relevant experience and highlighting that, if I were to have maybe one job that was related to education, but a ton that related to a different thing, that calls out, I do have experience related to this position, without making it just purely chronological. So it could be something where I have a lot of experience in this from 3 jobs ago. You can highlight that a little bit more by putting relevant experience above that and use their words back at them. Using keywords and phrases that they put in the job listing can help your resume pass through the applicant tracking system, which existed before AI, but basically reads keywords. So using a little bit of their language back at them can be useful here. So keep that job description up as you're applying to grab some of those words from there. Uh, Keep it simple. These are more formatting type things. Use a simple black and white resume, more likely to pass through those systems, and it's usually a little bit easier to read. Memberships and volunteering absolutely count. So consider creating a section for any professional memberships, groups, or organizations that you're involved in. DBSA 100% counts. It's all over my resume. So definitely, if you're a facilitator, that is an awesome skill. It's something that not everybody has. So consider also things beyond your literal job that you're doing right now or the job that you're applying for, and think about other things that you have built skills in and have experience with. Graduation years are optional. In recent years, job applicants have started to remove those graduation years from their education to avoid any kind of age discrimination. The only time I recommend definitely put it in is if you're actively in a program, like you haven't graduated yet. That way they know, okay, this person's in school and that might affect their bandwidth. But if you don't feel comfortable putting your graduation years in, that's become more and more of a common thing where people do not put that on their resume. So that is an option for you. And keeping it short, a one-page resume is typically the standard. If you have worked for a while, you have extensive experience, or in some way it makes sense for you to go beyond one page, another page is fine too. If you've got years of experience, it's only natural that it's going to spill into another page. But to the extent that you can keep it as streamlined as possible, the better. So this is an exercise to figure out what your skills are, what it said versus what it was. So your resume describes what you did at a particular job, but sometimes you develop skills beyond what the bullet point says. I'll give you an example. I used to teach speech and debate classes for children. They were about third through fifth grade, and I managed a classroom. I did that full time over the summer. Yes, I did literally teach them how to do speech and debate presentations and whatnot. However, I also learned a lot about thinking on my feet and sort of reading the energy in a room, which I use all the time. Comes up especially well within a facilitation standpoint, where, sort of making sure, okay, we're doing this, okay, we're gonna move on to this, and having that classroom plan. I use those skills all the time, but it's not literally what I would write on a resume. So sometimes that can help you reframe what you actually did in a particular job. So with that said, the real skill is the name of this exercise. So think of one job, class, experience, anything, and ask yourself, what did I literally do day to day? Is there anything I had to figure out in the moment? What would have gone wrong if I hadn't been there and did what I did? And is there anything you learned at this experience that you use regularly now? I'm going to put 3 minutes on the timer for this one. All right. See one in the chat that I think is really great here. Let's see here. I have autism, and so I do not have much of a job history. I have from time to time volunteered with some nonprofits who help the homeless. I also got a certificate at the community college in sustainability. Those volunteer jobs helped me to learn to be patient. Yes. Completing the certificate helped me learn that I can manage a higher education. I can manage higher education and gave me a routine. Those are wonderful skills to have. Time management, patience is definitely a virtue. And just validating for yourself, like I can do this, schedule and whatnot. Those are all really valuable things and skills that you learned in those opportunities. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Um, Taking care of my son regularly makes me and my wife feel better and more at peace, and I believe my son likes it too. That's good. I'm glad he likes it too. I hope he does. But yeah, having children in general is that you learn so many different things through that. I'm sure you could do a whole. I know people have done whole books on that. Let's see. Variance analysis is something I did day to day. I had to figure out how to story tell the financial data to non-finance professionals. If I hadn't have been there, we would have had high budget variance of over or underspending money. I still conduct variance analysis in my own life to ensure my family stays on budget. Yeah, that is so valuable. One of the things I learned in my economics class that I took in my doctoral program was the numbers can really tell a story in terms of the financial situation. You can really get a sense of what's going on even beyond the dollar amount. So that is a very invaluable skill, and one that definitely, is valuable, I think, to pretty much any position. work independently, making decisions that require immediate attention without the luxury of consulting managers or counterparts. Yeah, absolutely. Time management, meeting schedules and deadlines, seeing tasks through to completion, understanding project scopes, and executing goals independently. Yeah, those are all great. You articulated them very well, too. I think with very little rephrasing, that could definitely be a bullet point on a resume. So sometimes knowing what the skill was that you developed helps you articulate too, what to put in that bullet point. So it's just a matter of rephrasing that kernel that you teased out a little bit. So wonderful work, everybody. So cover letters, they're just another way of expressing who you are and why you're interested in the position. So again, you can use that Pixar story spine as a little bit of a guide here. But a few tips on that. Some questions to ask yourself and what should essentially be answered in the one-page cover letter is, who are you? So again, the story spine is really helpful with that. What do they say they're looking for? And I say they say because sometimes they are not articulating it in a very clear way, or they might be saying they want something and they don't really know how to express it. So use some of the language they include in their listing. Again, that helps with those keyword searches too. Why are you interested in them specifically? So think about that organization and why that particular one appeals to you. And why should we meet? This is a good place to talk about some of those soft skills, maybe some of the things that you figured out through the what did I literally do versus what was the skill that I learned. That's a great place to discuss that too. So those are a few tips. In terms of resume and cover letter, there are lots of different templates you can use online. I really like the ones on Canva. There's a lot of different options where you can literally just put in your information. But those are my tips as a career coach on what I've seen work, what tends to resonate with employers. A note here as well about AI for job applications. It's a super useful tool. I definitely have tinkered with it a lot. But it is important to use it responsibly. So here are some tips based mostly on my own trial and error and observing things. So first off, learning how to write a prompt is really helpful. This took me a really long time to figure out, and I'm still not great at it. Basically, LLMs speak a specific language. It takes some time to understand, but the more specific you are about, like, this is what I want, do this, don't do this, coming up with a way to communicate that clearly will help it to actually give you what you need. Because the more ambiguous you are, the more likely it's going to hallucinate or give you something that's not helpful. So it's a tool like you would use Microsoft Word or Office or something like that. If you leave it to its own devices, um, it's not gonna generate something immediately that's gonna be what you're looking for. So knowing how to use the tool effectively is useful here. Give contextual information, so including the job description, uploading your resume, giving it a sense of why you're interested. That'll help it in terms of the context. It should still be your writing, especially if, I've noticed with a lot of students I've worked with, they will just say, write me a cover letter for this job. And because they didn't put in anything else, you can literally tell which LLM they were using. For example, Gemini likes to say, I'm keen to blah, blah, blah. So, if I saw that in a resume or a cover letter, I'd say, I think you used Gemini for this. So I recommend either using it for a first draft if you're having trouble getting started, or use it at the end to clean things up. But make sure one of those drafts is yours, all of your sort of thoughts and express it in the way that is true to you. That'll help it to stay in your voice and to give you the product that you're looking for. And keep an eye on the time. This is something I struggle with ADHD. So LLMs often need a lot of babysitting. So a lot of it is I didn't say that in the prompt. You got to correct it and everything. Or it might take so long to write the prompt that you probably would have just been finished with it earlier if you had just done it from scratch. So sometimes it might be more time effective to have it just do one small piece rather than the whole thing. So being mindful of time and time management there is important. Learn from my mistakes, if anything. So those are some tips specifically to use AI. Um, Asking industry professionals for advice. So, if you want to know if a job is right for you, informational interviews are a great way to sort of learn about whether you are interested in that sort of field and interested in that kind of job. This is my networking without it feeling phony section. So it's just a fancy way of asking how they like their job. Informational interviews are just quick conversations with industry professionals. And it can give you information in terms of, does this sound like something I'm interested in or not? They can also have a secondary benefit of building your network in a focused way. So, if you're coming at it looking for advice, that's often a really good strategy in terms to get people to talk to you. So ways to find people to connect with. LinkedIn obviously is a great one. Alumni associations, if you happen to graduate from a college and you have access to that. Former colleagues at different positions, friends, professional organizations for your desired industry. And I have a link to a really great source on ONET, which helps you search for professional organizations in a particular industry you might be interested in. That's a really great way to find out about a particular industry to see if you're interested or a particular job. Your family could be one, and people in your local community. DBSA absolutely counts. I have met so many people around the country just through DBSA. So those are all places where you can ask people, what do you do for a living? Do you like doing that? And ask them questions about like literally what is their experience at doing a particular job. So, asking for the informational interview, research the person a little bit and be specific about why you want to talk to them. This is especially important if you're using LinkedIn, because if you just send them a request, the person will often, and you're not already connected with them or didn't have a conversation with them, they might not know who you are and they might not respond because they'll be like, I don't know who this person is. So, making it clear this is why I reached out to you is important here. Uh, Frame the request as looking for advice. Um, Ask for 15 minutes. And it's really just, hey, I saw you do this job. How do you feel about it? Do you like doing it? And just sort of gauging, what would you recommend for somebody who might be interested in it? Is there something that I should look into or learn more about? Come prepared with a couple questions. Um, don't ask for a job. The intention with these is literally to ask them whether they like doing their job or not and what they'd recommend you look into to help with that search. However, asking for a job is just, that's not the point of an informational interview. At the end of the meeting, one really great tip that I learned was to ask if they have any suggestions for more people for you to talk to. So that can sometimes, it's like a snowball effect where you meet more and more people. And then write them a quick thank you email later. Sometimes job search books will recommend writing a handwritten note. That's lovely, but at one time I didn't get a thank you note that was sent to me for literally a year because of the mail systems within within my work at the time. So just know that email is a good way to sort of quickly show appreciation. You can do the handwritten one if you want to, but definitely an email I think is the right approach here too. So, just in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of go through some of these because I want to spend some time on when it gets difficult at a job. But example of an informational interview request would just be, hi, I'm reaching out because I am interested in a job. Noticed you work at this place. Would love to chat with you for 15 minutes. So, just coming up with a question or two that you're interested in asking somebody. That can be helpful in terms of guiding the conversation. So, one way to do it is to list one or two jobs or fields you're genuinely curious about and think of some questions you'd want to ask that person. Um, Let me see where we're doing on time. We have a minute or two, so I'll put 2 minutes on the clock. Right. See a couple here in the chat. What are some of your tips on better classroom management? I mean, I would love those tips too, so that's a great question. What's an example of someone in a leadership role that shaped how you understood your role? That's a great one because you can ask anybody in any industry that, and they'll probably have an interesting thing to say on that. So that's great. I love that one is very specific. So it's you're speaking the same language of the person in education, and then this one is one that you can apply to anybody. So that's a great combo of something specific as well as something broader. I'm looking to pivot from my previous career with video editing to tourism slash hospitality. I won't rule out video editing opportunities, but it's not a priority. What do you recommend is a good place to start down this career path? Oh, I love that. My husband's a video editor too. So, yeah, just saying this is some context on who I am. What would you recommend in my circumstance? Awesome. How can I increase my chances of getting the college teaching job? Yeah, that's great too. Especially if you're asking somebody who got the teaching job or whatnot. Or, it could be somebody who works with those people as well. Any actionable sort of question, that's always great to ask them too, because if you're coming to them for advice, people love feeling like they're experts. So they're likely to be willing to share. I love these. These are great. Thank you so much. All right, let's see. All right, so managing the hard days. Job searching is challenging, even if you don't live with a mood disorder. With one can be even more challenging. So I notice a particular emotional arc with job searching among most of the people I've worked with, and myself. So most people cycle through something like this. And for people with mood disorders, it can feel even more amplified. So usually at the beginning, there's optimism, energy's up, applications feel manageable. And then there's an element of friction where maybe you're not hearing anything back yet. You're starting to have some self-doubt, discouragement. Rejections land harder than they would otherwise. This is where depression or anxiety may spike. And then over time, you recalibrate, adjust, keep going, and this cycle can just repeat itself. Sometimes skipping some of the steps too. So sometimes it's mostly discouragement and then recovery, discouragement, recovery. So this is the main cycle that I see people get stuck in when applying to jobs. Yeah, I get stuck in discouragement too. I definitely hear that. Let's see. So knowing the cycle, knowing this information doesn't make it easier, but it can help you sort of contextualize, oh, I'm definitely not the only one experiencing this. If this is a cycle that people are going through, I guarantee you everybody who's searched for a job at some point um, will probably relate. Um, so a few tips in terms of mood disorders specifically. When depression shows up. This can manifest in many different ways, just as unique as any one person is. But some common ones that I've experienced, I've noticed other people experience are avoiding opening your laptop for days, sending an application, immediately feeling like it was pointless, losing track of what you've applied to because you might have brain fog, comparing your timeline to other people's timelines, and feeling as though the situation is just not going to change, all hope is lost. One time my husband said one time he was talking to a friend of his and they were saying like if you could bottle the feeling of anxiety and sadness about not having a job, it would be like a deadly weapon. Essentially, that feeling it can be really debilitating. So a few things that I recommend in terms of strategies for search-related depression, shrinking the task down on any given day. So again, sometimes your energy might be lower. That's just the nature of having a mood disorder. So, setting smaller goals on days where you're feeling it a little bit more, can help you make progress in a way that's sustainable. So, maybe one day, you usually apply to 5 positions in a day. Maybe that day you just apply to one, or you do something else that maybe isn't applying to a job that day, but is still useful. And you just leave it at that. It's like you're recognizing your energy needs to you're not going to have as much energy as usual, so you adjust based on that to meet yourself where you are. Externalizing the tracking is helpful. So writing down key information. So this is the jobs you applied to, the steps taken, using a planner or spreadsheet so that your brain does not have to hold it. That can just, if you're feeling brain foggy, that can be really helpful. I will be sending out a resource sheet, and I actually designed a planner to help me in those circumstances, that I do have available, for you to take a look at as well. So that I do have listed on there, and you can get the link to take a look at that. Um, Name the state. So sometimes it's just a matter of saying, I am in a depressive dip right now. That helps you treat it as I'm experiencing this episode at this moment. It's not permanent. I'm in a particular episode right now. And use your treatment team. If the search is significantly worsening your symptoms, that is worth bringing to a provider. So those are some tips I have in terms of depression end. However, hypomania and mania can sometimes show up too. High energy phases can really feel productive, but they do also have risks. Over applying without tailoring. So that's a quantity over quality strategy. I've definitely done this myself. But ultimately, being more tailored tends to have more of a result. So you end up expending energy doing all of these applications when you might have had more success if you just spent all that time on one really tailored application. Making impulsive decisions about opportunities. So that could be accepting a position too quickly or rejecting it too quickly. So not taking the time to think about it. Crashing after a push, losing momentum entirely. So you push yourself too hard to do all these things, and then you're just totally exhausted afterwards. Those are things that I've experienced a lot, in looking for jobs and applying for jobs, many times. So a couple of strategies: setting a daily application cap. So even on high energy days, figure out what's going to be a sustainable amount of things that you're going to do. So maybe that's 2 to 3 tailored applications versus 10 generic ones. Or, something, I'm just going to update my resume, this one time versus I'm going to make a billion different resumes to send out to different places. So keeping it sustainable in that way is helpful. Setting time limits. So again, using that Pomodoro method to limit the time. So only spend one Pomodoro on one task at a time, move on to something else. Getting movement in, that's a good way to use that energy in a healthy way. It also gets you away from your desk most of the time. So sometimes if you're feeling a lot of energy, moving around can help. And it release endorphins in a different way than, say, the dopamine hit of applying to something. And wait before making decisions. Accepting or declining positions too fast, can create more complication. So I recommend just checking in with people you trust before you make any huge decisions. Um, from there, I think this is the last activity, so we should be okay here. Okay, so getting ready so you don't have to stay ready. So, a couple of questions to consider are: what's a sustainable minimum viable search days? That one application, one LinkedIn message, 15 minutes of researching, maybe doing a LinkedIn learning class, figuring out what that looks like for you. Who's one person you can contact when you're not feeling well? And what is an activity that reliably helps you manage your symptoms? I'll put, let me see here. I'll put 3 minutes on the clock for people to think, and feel free if you could feel comfortable to put them in the chat. All right. I see here in the chat. Some days just doing anything is better than doing nothing. Right. And that's why setting a minimum that can help you build momentum where it's like, you know what? I just said I was going to research this thing for 15 minutes. I did that. That's the minimum I need to do today in order to feel like I made progress. So not pushing yourself, literally thinking like, what would I feel like I at least did something today? Because anything, maybe just one really small step is going to be more than doing nothing at all. Going for a good walk, run, or hike would be the best thing. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I tend to brush off moving, so making sure to get that time in is important. It does really have a good effect on you from a physiological standpoint and a psychological standpoint. uh, 30 to 60 minutes minimum, I'm comfortable with. That's great. Yeah, in terms of the time, that's really useful to know too, where it's like I just want to do like a half hour of something and I'll feel like I accomplished something. That's great because then you don't have to pin down like I want to do this activity versus this one. So that's really good. Reset activity, stepping away and taking a here and now break. Yep, or nap if time allows. I struggle with anxiety and panic attacks when things get overwhelming, if I feel that I'm in over my head. I need to ground myself at the first sign of symptoms. Absolutely. I'm glad that you recognize that's a good way for you to reset too. Stepping away, being mindful, that's all excellent. Okay, I think we are in the final stretch here. So job searching is a journey, knowing that while the process is not going to be easy, there are people and resources out there to help you. So a couple I'll bring up here, but I am going to send out for everybody who signed up for the workshop today, with whatever email address you put in to sign up on Eventbrite. I'm going to be sending out a resource sheet with some recommended things, more information about me and my practice, as well as mental health resources through DBSA. But you can also watch the recording of our previous workshop, the DBSA YouTube channel. That's the handle, but I'm sure we'll put a link in the chat as well. In terms of resume and cover letter templates, I recommend Canva. There's tons out there, but I found the most interesting selection of different templates there. Um, Pomodoro method, there's tons of free apps. I have a few I recommended in the resource sheet that I'll send out. But also going on YouTube, sometimes they have like a lo-fi timer where it's 30 minutes on, 10 minutes off. Any real configuration of time, they probably have a Pomodoro timer for that you can put up on YouTube. ONET has that professional associations database, but that'll be on the resource sheet. It's a great place to find other people working in particular industries, potential people to reach out to for informational interviews. And I always like to plug the local library for career resources. Um, Depending on where you are, they might have different ones. I know the LA Public Library has so many that, even spending some time taking my 30 minutes a day to research new things, like I don't think I've even scratched the surface of everything. So I always like to plug that. So wherever you are, check out your library. Those are some references. All right, and that is the end of my formal presentation. My contact information is here. My website is there. That'll also be on the resource sheet. So if you ever want to reach out to me directly, feel free to reach out to me there. Um, we are recording this session, so this will go out soon. You'll get an email with the link as well as the resource sheet. So that'll be going out soon. For the Q&A, I do turn off the recording just to make people feel comfortable to share and whatnot. But I will say to the people who might be watching this later, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. I really, I feel very honored to spend this time with you and to learn more about you and to hopefully impart some lessons on what I did wrong so that other people could learn from those. So